welcome to the Street Pianist, a celebration of all the wonderful musicians who play street piano, even when nobody's listening. Hello, Mikey.
Hello there, Claire.
Hello. It's fantastic to be here talking to you. And maybe we should talk a bit about how we met, which was that we were both pianists on the piano.
That's correct, yes.
And I met you at the big finale concert.
That's right, down in Manchester.
That's right.
That was some night. What a show it was as well. It really was. It was amazing to be picked to play essentially in the heats. From my own point of view, I know obviously I was speaking for you as well, that it was just an amazing experience to be picked to play in these heats. So I was up in Edinburgh, and from our heat there was two, as it happens there was three actually went through. So when we went down to the concert in Manchester, obviously I was looking forward to seeing the young boy Sum and also Daria, who are both excellent, and they got through. And as it happens, Alice also got through as well, the great singer-songwriter. So there was three representing Edinburgh, and it was a joy to watch them. And it was the actual stage itself, when we actually got into the theatre and we seen the stage, it was sparse in some ways because it was this big stage and it had this big grand piano on it, and I just thought it looks absolutely amazing. It made me jealous, to be honest. That is like I would have loved to have played that piano.
It's inevitable, really, isn't it? Edinburgh put the rest of us to shade. It was almost embarrassing, really, that the rest of us had one pianist and Edinburgh had so much talent that there were three pianists got put through. And then when you watched the episode and you saw people like you and Bronnie, and there was so much talent in Edinburgh, I bet they would have loved to have sent even more than three people through.
Yeah, that's the kind of feeling that I got as well. The way it worked out on the day. So the show itself, it's not to really give too much away. It's filmed over a couple of days, the actual heats, because there's enough people for it. There's a good amount that they have to do with each person I've got to interview. That's about an hour probably by the time they interview you before it, and then we speak to Claudia as well, and then you'll play your piece, you'll play it a couple of times, and there's a big crowd there and stuff like that. So it takes place over a couple of days. And I remember I went on, and obviously I was nervous, everybody's nervous, and I was just glad to get through it without making any mistakes. That was the first thing. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I've done quite well there, and I was actually quite proud of what I'd done. Most people I speak to, in fact, just about everybody speaks about how proud they are of having done it, and to be able to conjure this energy from inside them that they didn't think they had, to be able to go and do this.
Yeah.
I've played lots and lots of gigs, but this was a sort of different level of, I don't know, exposure. There are so many things about that day that were new to me, or new experiences, I should say. And probably the thing that took me back the most, because in my mind's eye, before I went and played, I went through a lot of it in my mind as to how's this going to play out. Okay, so I'm going to arrive, and then I'm going to talk to the crew, and then maybe do an interview, then I'm going to walk on, talk to Claudia, and these are all huge things. But in my own mind, I thought I'm just getting myself prepared for them. So when all these things happened, that was great. I'd been through that and I'd walked through that in my mind beforehand. But there was one thing that caught me out, and that was there's loads of cameras, but there was a camera that was right in front of your face, which was quite intimidating. It was just right on top of the piano, a big camera. And I thought, I can't look at that. In fact, normally when I play gigs, I'll look at the audience, I'll smile, I'll interact with them and that kind of thing. But on this occasion, I thought, I'm going to need to just look down, concentrate, do my breathing or something, just make sure I play the thing right.
Yeah.
And probably about halfway through the piece, I started to get a bit more comfortable. I thought, this is going quite well.
Yeah.
So I lifted my head, I looked up, and I knew the camera was there, it was all right. But I looked in the reflection of the piano was so new. It was so new, it was like a mirror. And I seen in the reflection of the piano hundreds of people behind me.
Right.
And they all had their phones out. And I went, oh my goodness, this is crazy, this is intense. And then I thought, okay, I just need to look back down again. I played loads of gigs, but that was just like something completely different, because when you play a gig, quite often you're with a band, or you're singing as part of a band, or you're a two-piece. This was just me.
Yeah.
And all these cameras, all these people, just for that one moment, they were there for me.
Yeah.
And it was the same for you, Claire, as well, for that one moment, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, whatever.
It's a funny thing, though, because The first person who said to me about the fact that the piano was so well polished, it was like a mirror and you could see what was behind you, and also your awareness of the cameras. And I didn't notice either of those things. And it's funny as well, because you are much more experienced as a performer than me. You are a gigging performer and you have been for a long time, whereas I've mostly been playing in my bedroom and barely, not even very much of that, if I'm honest, apart from recently. And I didn't notice the mirror and I didn't notice the cameras. I was just focused on playing the piano. And one of the things that I struggle with, because I do perform to audiences occasionally, and one of the things that I'm not great at is paying attention to the audience. I will just be looking at the piano. And also, I've never learned to sight read, so I tend to look at the keys while I'm playing.
Sure.
I'm looking down rather than out.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I try and remember is to look at the audience. I can't do it for too long or else I'll lose my place. But I do try and look at the audience. And I had actually, before I went into the station, I was thinking, I must remember to try and look at the audience and try and engage with the audience. But actually, it was the same. I mean, I don't know if it was the same in all the cities, but it was the same in Liverpool as well, that the audience was behind me.
Yeah, that's
in
right.
front of me was a piano, but even on the other side of the piano, it was just station.
That's right.
And so I couldn't really interact with the audience. And there were so many cameras, I wouldn't have even known which one to look at.
Yeah.
So I did end up just interacting with the piano and being pretty oblivious to everything else.
I think that's the way to be. So I had to do something which I had to almost reverse engineer the way that I would normally go on stage, because I get a lot of the joy through performing by looking out at people, by smiling, and by, you know what it is? It's dead simple. It's a gig is like a transfer of energy. It's a transfer of energy from the musicians on the stage to the audience, and then the audience, they give it back to you, and then when they give it back to you, it makes it all worthwhile. And then there's this sort of perpetual cycle of energy. And when there's lots of energy at a gig, that's the great gigs. That's the greatest ones. That's the ones that you will always remember. When you're looking out at the others, people smiling, they're dancing or whatever. They might not be. They might just be listening intently. I played a show a couple of weeks ago with a band that I play with, dumb instrument. Now, with that band, they are a 7-piece band, and they have got a brass section and guitars and some drums as well. But it's all about the songs, it's all about the lyrics, it's all about the words, and all of the songs are written by a guy called Tom Murray, who's basically a kind of award-winning songwriter, but his lyrics are fantastic, and people will go along and watch the shows because they want to hear the lyrics, and they want to dive into the story behind the song. So that's why we all play really quietly, or as quietly as we can. But there is dynamics, there's louds and softs, and when required, but I'll look out to the audience during those shows, and even though they're really quiet, they're listening intently, and there's a different kind of energy. It's that kind of transcendent energy that you get.
See, it's funny because I am a much more experienced singer than I am a pianist, and I've always sung, and I'm also a conference speaker. So I'd spend a lot of time on stage interacting with audiences. And when I'm singing or when I'm speaking, I'm always looking out, and I'm deliberately finding people to make eye contact with. I'm scanning the audience. I'm making sure that I'm including them in what I'm doing. And absolutely what you say, I get energy from them. I know a lot of people, particularly conference speakers, who don't feel so much like performers. I do, but a lot of people don't. The bigger the audience, the worse they feel. Whereas for me, the bigger the audience, the better, because I get more energy. There's more people, and that's weird. Exactly what you say.
It's so weird, and it's exactly the same for me. I will be nervous stroke excited before any performance. Probably more excited nowadays than the nerves, but it used to be that the nerves were more than the excitement, so it's like the trade-off was not quite so good. But now I'll probably be more nervous if there's less people. Because if you've got a sort of sparse room and you can't really engage with anybody, and you start thinking those things that you always think were not played well, or we sound terrible, or I'm probably sure they noticed a mistake, or all these crazy things. Whereas you can go and play a show to 2,000 people or more, and you just can't wait to get on there because they're buzzing, you're buzzing, and it's just, that's what you do it for. And you'll look forward to those shows for a long time. They don't come along very often, but and you just know even beforehand that there's this kind of excited energy in a room, that's going to be fantastic.
To be honest, that's what's put me off. I mean, that and many other things, not least the lack of talent for me, but it's what's put me off the idea of trying to be a professional musician. because I know that you have to try and make it, and you have to spend a lot of time in rooms with little or no audience, or audiences who really don't care that you're there. So like those gigs where you have to just play in the corner of a restaurant or something, and
absolutely.
people aren't there to listen to you.
Yeah.
And that puts me off. If I'm going to perform, I want an audience that's big and lively and paying attention and wants to be there and wants to hear me, not just a handful of people and a dog.
Yeah.
That would be less fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lottery. Thankfully, most of the things that I do now it'll be like, okay, a band that I've played with for many years where they will put on special events and people will buy tickets and you're guaranteed an audience because they know what they're coming to get. Or I'll do sort of session or date things where you just turn up on a night where a band hadn't got a keyboard player that night and they're like a wedding band or something, and they'll have a 50 or 60 song set and you'll go, I know most of them, so you just turn up, you meet the guys and then you play. And that's fine because that's a wedding and it's a celebration and everybody is so happy to be there, so that's great. So you get a buzz off of that. It's been a while since I've done something where you're in the corner or there's nobody there. You have to do these things sometimes.
You're lucky because you've reached a point in your career now where you don't have to do that. But I think for a lot of people starting out, it's hard to avoid those.
It's impossible to avoid.
Yeah.
We used to, years ago, we would travel hundreds of miles and play gigs where we didn't know if they were going to be any good or not. The venue didn't know who you were, and they would be terrible. And you would maybe driven 200 miles or something, and we would always joke to each other on the way back, it's character building. So there was so many gigs I've done like that is towards the early part. But you know what? It's like any job, it's like any profession. You go into any job, you're a teenager, let's say. I remember my first job, I worked in a shop and I was a teenager, and as a result of that, probably didn't really get any respect whatsoever. But at that age, I knew that's the way it was going to be, and I just had to accept it.
You just have to go through it.
You just have to get through it, and I got through it. And with age comes a bit of respect sometimes. But I feel as if, though, that if you just do the hard work in any chosen field, then eventually that's where you get respect. And actually, that's one of the reasons why, I guess, that's one of the many reasons that I do it. Of course, I enjoy the feeling of actually playing. I'll play myself. It doesn't have to be an audience here. I get joy out of that.
Because it's funny, because I actually thought, as I was saying before, that I don't like the idea of a small, indifferent audience. But I've said to other people, and this is also true, people are contradictory, I like playing street pianos because everybody ignores me. And actually, if you're playing in a piano in the corner of a train station, nobody's there to hear you play. They're busy. They're on their way somewhere. They mostly completely ignore you. And I like that because it means there's absolutely no pressure. It's just me having fun in a corner. And if somebody happens to pay attention and give me a little bit of a smile and a nod, then actually that's special. And I think maybe it's because it's not a music venue. I think if I was to walk into the corner of a pub where I was officially supposed to be performing and only 2 people and a dog have turned up, and they don't really care, even though it was supposed to be a gig, that's completely different to me being in the corner of a train station with 2 people, a dog who don't really care, because they never thought I was going to be there in the first place. They're not there for me, so it's fine that they don't care.
I totally agree with you. I think the phenomenon of street pianos nowadays in the UK is, from my point of view, is relatively new, because I don't remember there being many public pianos when I was younger in 80s, 90s. I don't really remember there being anything like that. And so I think it's quite a recent innovation. But you know what? I bet if you went back 100 years, there would have been perhaps not public pianos that folk could play, but everybody had a piano in their house
and
pubs as well. And I bet you, if you went into pubs, people would just go up and play.
I bet they would.
And it's a different. So this, what I'm trying to say, I think it's went full circle, and this idea of I love what you just said there, Claire, about the idea that you can go into a station and you can go in there, play anonymously, but not anonymously, because you're actually. Couldn't be more public what you're actually doing.
Yes, it's a weird kind of contradiction. But
It's like you're giving your music out. There is no negative let's say aspects to this, because as you say, that people are not coming in and they're not paid to come and see you with any preconceptions or anything.
Yeah.
They either ignore you or they like it.
Yeah.
And there are no downsides to that. The kind of person I am, that appeals to me as well. When I was a kid, if I would go on holiday and I would see a piano anywhere, I would always want to play it.
Mm-hmm.
And I would always believe, weirdly, that it was my right to play it.
Yeah.
Because piano, if somebody puts a piano somewhere,
Yeah.
then for me, the natural position of a piano is being played.
Yeah.
And so I've got another job as well. I'm also a postman. And I remember one day, postmen are always getting roused for leaving people's gates open.
Okay.
So after a while, you learn to shut everybody's gate after you've left it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I remember there was one day a guy said to me, "Were you delivering my meal yesterday?" I said, "I know, I think it was somebody else actually." He said, "Whoever it was, they left my gate open." He said, "Gates are meant for," "gates are meant for shutting." And I went, "Okay, no problem. Well, I'll tell the guy not to do it again." So I walked away and it got me thinking. And I thought, are gates made for shutting or are they made for opening? Because if they were made for shutting, it would just be a fence.
Very good point.
I think a piano is the same thing. Like, why would you have a piano that's just a bit of furniture? Why not just have a table?
Yeah.
Now, tables don't make the same noise as a piano.
Yeah.
So I think if somebody's going to go to the effort of making a piano, a wonderful instrument, and then it's so heavy as well, and then taking it somewhere and putting it there, then the natural position of a piano is that it should be getting played all the time.
Yes.
In the same way that a gate should be open, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. You know what, though? I love the idea of street pianos because I'm the same as you. I've always, whenever I've spotted a piano somewhere, because I've played since I was a child, and whenever I saw a piano, I would be distracted by it. I'd be thinking, I wonder if I'm allowed to play that.
Yeah.
But I would always be worried, I'm probably not allowed. Particularly when you see them in places like churches and church halls.
Yeah.
But also in people's houses, if it's just sitting in a corner and nobody's playing it, and you're thinking, I wonder if I'm allowed.
Yeah.
And I'm probably not allowed. But and I think, I should probably leave it. I'll probably get told off if I have a go at playing that.
Absolutely.
But the thing about street pianos is it's an invitation.
Yeah.
There's no danger of anybody telling me off. I'm supposed to play it.
Yeah. And
I love that.
Yeah.
So when you were a child, would you just go and play all those pianos anyway? If you saw one, would you play it?
You know what? I would just assume that I would be allowed to play it.
Mm-hmm.
So if I went, I think we went to France when I was a kid and there was a piano at the campsite. And anyway, I just went up and played it. And I remember I played like Blue Moon and I was like 11. So I think this was slightly endearing to the older people that were there. They were thinking, oh, a young kid that knows this sort of, I don't know, old swing or jazz standard type thing. But I like that kind of music because my granddad was a jazz pianist and my other granddad played piano as well and they had a piano in the house and that's how I got into it.
I was going to ask you, how did you learn? When did you learn? How did that come about?
Just what you were saying there about a piano being in a room or in a pub or in an open space. It almost seems like an invitation to play, but when there's a piano in a house, it's slightly different because you feel as if you want to ask, is it okay if I play that? So my gran had a piano and nobody really played it in our house. My granddad had played years before, but had stopped. So as a kid, pianos are very alluring to a toddler anyway. So you want to go up and hit it. And then eventually you work out that you can hit different keys and it'll make a different noise and it's really exciting for a kid. So I would go and I would play it or try to as a kid. And then eventually, this was one of these pianos that had a key. So it used to remain open. Then eventually, as more grandkids and stuff like that came along, it was too much. It was getting a bashing.
Yeah.
So the key came out and it got locked. So the rule was, if you wanted to play the piano, you had to go and have a piano lesson with my grand's pal. Uh-huh. And my grand's pal was a curling pal from the ice rink or whatever.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to play the piano. I didn't really want to go to piano lessons. So I just said, oh yeah, I'll go to piano lessons. I said, okay, the key comes out, there you go, have a shot. So then she arranged for me to go to piano lessons with her pal. And I remember it came round till Tuesday. And I was getting driven round to this person's house. And, where am I going? I said, you're going to piano lessons? And I said, oh, is this really happening? and it really was. And I went to this lady, Mrs. Marshall, and I actually stayed with her for about 9 or 10 years. This was at the age of 8 I started.
Okay.
What we learned was the sort of, I suppose you could say, the fairly bog standard associated board, classical music syllabus, so it's lots of scales and all the grades and all that kind of thing. So I did all that. And that was fulfilling enough because I did enjoy classical music, there's no doubt about it. But there was something else that I really enjoyed as well, which I got into from about the age of 10 or 11. Because the first 2 or 3 years of playing, you just go along and you just... I don't know if I was that inspired by it to begin with, but my other granddad, he passed away when I was 3.
No.
But he had an organ, like a Yamaha organ,
Uh-huh.
and it just looked like the Starship Enterprise compared to an actual piano.
Did it have staggered keyboards?
Yeah, it did. It was a 2-tier thing,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly. And the thing that got me was all the buttons were different colours, and it had 6 different instruments. So like brass, probably woodwind, electric piano, organ, and maybe a synthy kind of sound or something.
It sounds a lot like one that my husband had when he was a child, and that still lives in his mother's house. Yeah, it had lots of pedals as well.
Yeah,
big wooden thing,
it was
coloured
wooden.
buttons.
And it had backing tracks on it as well.
Yeah.
And really, I just wanted to go up and hit all the buttons and see what all the different sounds made.
Yeah.
But I remember one day I was at his house, so I was allowed to play that because I was learning the piano. I was a sort of 10 or 11 by this point, and I opened up the piano stool. I didn't know that they actually opened, and I found inside it loads of sheet music, and I found a bit of sheet music called The Entertainer, which is a ragtime piece.
Yeah, I love it.
And at that time, my hands were really small, but this was the proper sheet music for it. And
It's all octaves, isn't it?
Yes,
the
octaves.
original sheet
It's
music,
all
it's just octaves all over the place.
All over the place. And I started to learn this, and I thought, right, at that exact moment, it completely clicked for me what this whole thing was, because, and it was really difficult for me to learn and play, but I learned it. And I right away thought, or I knew that if I could learn this, then this is something that I could impress people with.
Yeah.
And I thought the idea of learning something and impressing people really stuck with me.
So did that become your party piece then?
Yeah, it did. Because I remember, like, I would be like primary 6 at school, and we used to love arranging parties. We used to love arranging surprise parties at the school for teachers or people leaving and stuff like that. So that would be the thing that I would do at the surprise party. You would get you go to the gym hall, there would be a piano in there, and a couple of lassies would go and get the teacher. Oh, Mrs. Kirkwood, Michael's in the gym, he's causing a stooshy or whatever. And they would say, I'll go and see him, and then he would go through, and everybody in there would be a surprise. And then I would start playing the piano, and I think I started playing like the Maple Leaf Rag or something. Back in those days, the kids were into Rick Astley, they weren't into Scott Joplin. But
and this sheet music that you found, was that from the grandfather who was a jazz pianist?
Yes, it was. And he passed away in 1983. But he used to have his own jazz band in the 60s. See, he actually had 4 jobs. He worked in the shipyards in Govan. I was a draftsman there. He had his own jazz band. I was also a promoter as well. Right. And he wrote for the Glasgow Herald, I believe, as a journalist as well.
Oh.
And he worked with Billy Connolly. And in the same way you're interviewing me, he interviewed
I have
Billy
just
Connolly.
listened to Billy Connolly's autobiography, The Windswept, an interesting one, and he talks about working on the shipyards. Yeah, who knows? Maybe he even mentions your granddad when he's talking about
possibly.
it.
I remember my gran had told me that one day he brought Billy Connolly back to the house to do an interview with him in the house, and my gran wouldn't let him in the house because he was too dirty. But just because he'd just come off his ship.
Yeah.
So they had to do the interview in the car. And then that was that. They went away after that. So and so he was a promoter as well. He brought over Glenn Miller and all these guys to Glasgow. But he would have been over 100 now. But he liked to keep himself busy as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh, it's a shame that you didn't get to know him better, obviously, because he's dying when you were so young.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. Yeah.
But you still got that legacy. That's lovely that you found the music to the entertainer in his piano stool.
That didn't. It sent me on a journey for the next sort of 30 years, if you like. From that, I developed a love of all ragtime music, all sort of syncopated jazz, I suppose you could call it. And then from there, jazz music as well. Now, I'm not going to turn around here and say I'm a great jazz musician because it's a different discipline, but I really have a huge admiration for the great jazz pianists and composers like Oscar Peterson and things like that. You know, I'll sit and watch the stuff from YouTube. And it blows my mind. I'll try and copy as much of it as I can.
Like my son is in the next room and he plays piano and he's called Oscar.
Yeah.
And Oscar Peterson was one of the people that we were thinking of when we were deciding what to name him.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely.
So we did love the idea of him growing up to be. We didn't really think, actually, to be honest, it was just, we liked the idea. We didn't have a plan for him to grow up and become a jazz pianist, but he does play jazz piano. And he's only 15, so who knows? But it's lovely to have those ideas and be able to carry those ideas forward. And the thing about the entertainer, it's just hilarious because we were talking earlier about the fact that I had piano lessons as well when I was a child, and it was the standard stuff. It was the scales and the grades and the arpeggios and classical music. And it was great, but it didn't totally excite me. And when I was a teenager, I started getting into jazz and blues. And the very first song that I taught myself to play outside of piano lessons was The Entertainer. But I have to confess that I persevered for a little while with the octaves, and then I thought, no, this is too hard. And I I arranged a new version for myself that didn't have the octaves.
and that goes against every principle that you learn in the classical syllabus, because as we were talking about earlier, there is a very particular way to play these pieces. I'm not sure if that's what the original composers intended. I'm sure that if you asked them, and most of them died 200 or 300 years ago, but I'm sure if you asked them, they would be quite happy for people to put their own slant on parts of that.
I've heard it said that for a lot of classical music, when you look at the original sheet music, those original scores were just supposed to be guides.
Yeah.
So any marks that they added and any kind of dynamics and all of the rest of it, it was just a bit of an idea.
Yeah.
And they expected people, it might have depended, I'm not an expert, it might have been different at different times, but certainly some of those composers, they were like, you take this and you do what you want with it.
Yeah.
You don't have to do it exactly the way I said.
Yeah.
In the same way that Shakespeare, spelling in Shakespeare's time was all over the place, and it wasn't like you didn't, like the Shakespeare's text is not the definitive version. It was just, it doesn't have to be exactly how he wrote it.
Yeah.
But then people take it and it becomes set in stone in a way that goes against the spirit of music, I think.
I totally agree, yeah. But I suppose you have to have a set of standards that you can base everything on, and then the entertainer, or what you've done is you've abridged it to suit yourself. There are kids out there that will want to play certain pieces like I was. I wanted to play the entertainer, but I didn't have a big enough hand span to play the octaves and that kind of thing. So I abridged it.
Yeah.
So I think that it's 1, 2, and 5, finger 1, 2, and 5 that creates the like that. So my hand wasn't big enough to do that. So I was just using fingers 1 and 2 just to do that, create the box.
Yeah.
And it's an approximation. And I knew that as I was doing it, that as I got older, I would be able to play it properly.
Yeah.
And I would try, and it would really hurt me trying to open my hand, because I think at that time I could only go like maybe 7 notes or something. I've actually got quite small hands just now anyway, but they're perfect for playing octaves, so it's quite handy.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has different ways into music and different ways of understanding it, and there's no right or wrong way. There's so many different kinds of music and different ways of playing music. One of the things that I think is true, not just in music, is that the more you understand some rules and some principles, the easier it is to then experiment and fly and break those rules.
Yeah.
It's easier to break rules when you know what they are. Yeah. And then that gives you a kind of a foundation that you can fly from.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with learning the basics.
I agree with that. But you know what? And I would hazard a guess that you're probably the same. Most of the cool things that I've learned are things that I've taught myself or discovered by listening to music, replicating music, by watching other performers. Since I stopped many years ago going to lessons and learning a particular syllabus, I've driven in the way that most people have. I've driven my own level forward through my own determination, if you like, to find out I could have got a book 30 years ago and read it and learn all the things that it took me 30 years to learn. But that wouldn't have been any fun.
Exactly.
Because I think you have to discover things on your own terms. And so I remember just an example, and I bet this happened to you, at some point when I was younger, and I might have been about 13 or 14, I discovered the blues scale. And I discovered it all by myself, on my own. And I just thought, this is the greatest. I just discovered something unbelievable here. And I remember showing it to people going, look, you can play this scale and it works in this key.
Yeah.
It's amazing, I've discovered this. And then, so I discovered that all on my own. And yet, if I'd read a book, I could have discovered it 6 years previous.
Could have,
You know?
but it wouldn't have had the same meaning. So
It wouldn't.
I'm also an ex-high school maths teacher, and one of the things that I learned about teaching maths, which is known as well, it's just really hard to act on it. And unfortunately, the way the schooling system is structured, very hard to act on it. But if you tell people the rules of math and just tell them this is a formula, follow this formula, memorize this, memorize that, it's meaningless.
Yeah.
But there are other ways of teaching math. So I'll just give you one example. I don't want to get too mathematical because this isn't a math podcast, but pi is 3.14. And a lot of people, most people just know that there's this weird number. It's called pi. It's 3.14. Its digits go on forever. And if you stick it in places in formulas, it does things. And it can help you to find the radius of a circle, and it can help you to find the circumference of a circle. It's just some weird number that just happens to do this thing. Well, it's actually what it represents is the ratio between the radius and the circumference of a circle. And it's the relationship between those two distances. And the relationship between those two distances is always the same. And the number is 3.14. And you can get children to discover that by getting them to measure radiuses and circumferences of circles and put them in a chart, and then get them to pay attention and to look at them, and then they'll work out, that's weird. They're always related in this way. And this number keeps popping out. Well, you know what? It's got a name. It's called pi. But when they've discovered it, then they understand what it means. And it's not just a weird number that you just stick into formulas.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is what you discovered, the blue scale, and became meaningful to you because you discovered it.
And I feel as if that, I mean, I've told my dad this many times, that I could have literally read a theory book and learnt about the blue scale, and then later on learnt about the boogie scale and learnt about different scales that you can use and improvisation and that kind of thing.
Are you talking to your dad about the benefits of teaching yourself the blue, or discovering the blue scale?
Yeah, my dad, he doesn't play music, but he's a huge fan of music, and I think a huge fan of musicians. And I know that when he was younger, probably in his 20s, one of his heroes was a guy called Keith Emerson, who
I don't know that name.
Was actually played in the Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Oh, I do know that name.
Yeah,
okay, I just didn't know his first name.
Yeah, so Keith Emerson, and he was a world-class Hammond organ player and piano player, really. He's always had a huge appreciation of great piano players. He's always loved Rick Wakeman and these kind of guys. And I think he's always been keen for me to try to or play to a certain level, but he's never been in any way pushy. I think I always wanted to try and get to that level so that I could try and show him, oh, look, this is possible. I can try and do a few of the kind of things that your heroes were doing. So I'll always talk to him about the kind of things that I'm doing or I'm learning, and I would always say to him, I could have probably just read a book 30 years ago. The process of actually learning and discovering things is much more fun for me, and I still do that now. I'll just sit down, and much like your son Oscar improvises and that kind of thing, I'll do the same thing as well. And through improvisation, you'll go places that you don't expect. You'll make mistakes, and when you make mistakes, that's when you discover things.
Yeah.
You overextend your pinky, and you go, oh, wait a minute, what's that?
That happens to me quite often. I play notes by accident, and I think, I liked that. That was good.
Scale. What's that scale? And then you'll go look up, oh, that's the augment.
Yeah.
And you'll go, oh, I didn't know that existed. I'm going to use that all the time now.
That thing about the blues scale as well. I met a pianist. Sadly, he didn't. He gave me his phone number, but then he didn't respond to me, and I think he was just shy. But this was at St Pancras in London, street pianist. He was playing some lovely bluesy stuff, but he was really shy. And I said to him, "Would you like to be interviewed?" And he was really keen to tell me that he was homeless. But you can't tell, can you? I said, no, I can't tell, because he was really well dressed and he was all neat. And I've just managed to get myself a job, and I'm making sure that I'm all neat. And he's got himself a job in a restaurant. But then he wanted me to play as well, so I played. And he watched me and he was like, "Can't do that." I said, "And what can't you do?" "I can't play the white." And he was only, and I noticed when I'd heard him play, but he was only playing the black note.
Yeah.
And he completely taught himself, and he liked the sound of the blues. And it just worked out that if he only played the black notes, he got this great bluesy sound.
Yeah, I know. In fact, that scale is the pentatonic scale,
Yeah.
which is the blues scale, but just without one note.
Yeah.
And weirdly, I discovered the blues scale first, and then years later, I discovered the pentatonic scale. And the pentatonic scale is much easier to solo over than the blues scale. And especially when you play, guitarists talk about it all the time, and they play that scale when they're jamming and improvising all the time. And I wish that I'd discovered that first rather than the blues scale, because it probably would have made it a lot easier for me to. Because just when you're going up to that raised fourth, sometimes it scuppers your journey, your flight up the keyboard a little bit, but it sounds great though, and especially when you're bouncing off it and stuff as well, upwards or downwards. And it's weird because that's a scale which is so similar, it's just one less note. And of course, as I discovered later on, you can play an E flat and A flat, and it will sound great. And people think what you're doing is actually really hard, but it's actually much easier. There's actually one thing that I do with a band sometimes, and I think it's a James Brown piece that we'll do sometimes, and there's a bit of a piano solo in it, but the piano solo is actually all on the black keys. So what I can do is I can walk around the other side of the keyboard and just hit them randomly, and it'll sound good. And people will go, guys, amazing.
The thing about A flat as well is a lot of the songs that I sing and that I accompany myself are in A flat, and guitarists are just like, what are you doing? I don't know. I just listen. And the reason I play them in A flat is because it's a really comfortable key for me to sing in. But often it's because the originals were in A flat. And so that's just where I've ended up. And it's not because I'm trying to make things awkward for guitarists or even because I'm trying to be clever. It's just where I've landed.
So many times the guitarists that recorded tunes in the 60s and 70s, you'll listen back to it and you'll go, that's in E flat. And you'll go, they must have played it in E flat. But in actual fact, they just detuned their guitars. And for whatever reason they did, I'm sure there's a very specific reason for them doing it, or it may just have been because the singers just made it a bit easier for them because it's that half step lower. But that's really common, or even sometimes almost the quarter step. And you try to play along with it and you're going, this sounds horrific. You play along with the backing track or something.
It's not in tune with it.
It's just not in tune,
So do you, because I know that we said before that there aren't many street pianos right here local to you. But do you find yourself playing street pianos when you see them?
I will always play a street piano if there's not somebody on it, and I'll wait around until they leave, unless they're really good, and I'll give it 10 minutes. But yes, so if there's a piano anywhere, then I'll go up and play it. But I tend to be a bit more respectful now. I'll usually ask if I'm allowed, because I realise that maybe sometimes people don't want to hear piano. But if it's just sitting there and it's come and play me, I think there is one in Burn, like a kind of electric mini grand piano, or there certainly was, and I've played that one before. That's a shopping centre near Glasgow. There's obviously the one in the Central Station as well. And however, whenever I've been in there, there's always been somebody on it, and I've had to be going somewhere. I think I've only played that one once. Where I stay, which is in Ayrshire, there is not really anything like that. There's a great stage school close by that's got loads of pianos in it, and the cafe as well, so people are more than welcome to go up and play them. And so I've played that one a few times, so that's the kind of one. So whenever I see a piano, I really want to play it. But
if you just manage to find yourself just near a random piano and you find yourself playing it, what do you think your motivation is? Is it just because you enjoy playing piano, or are you aware of people around you and are you wanting some kind of reaction from them? Or
no, I actually don't. No, it's simply for the joy of playing. I love to hear beautiful noise. And if there's not beautiful noise around me, then I want to try to create some. Just for my own satisfaction, for my own joy. That's why I write a lot of music. If somebody else had written the music that I'd written, then I wouldn't need to write it. Because nobody had, then I need to write it so that I can hear it.
And I've just realised we haven't really talked about genres. So we talked about, are you enjoying ragtime? But beyond that, we've not really talked about it. So what genres, because I think it's more than one, I think I'm right in thinking, but what kind of stuff do you like to play and what kind of stuff do you write?
I go through different periods, if you like, stages, but the sort of period that I'm in at the moment, which has lasted for a good couple of years, is I like to write. You know what? I don't specifically go out to write in any genre. I start playing, and then it tends to be something which is romantically classical in the genre. So that's what's easiest for me at the moment. So I just go with the flow.
Yeah.
Like water will always take the easiest route to ground. So I just feel like, okay, that's what I feel like doing. So I'm just going to do that.
Right.
So it's romantic classic. And I play in a band called Pete Loaf. And
I
that's
love that.
and that is a Meat Loaf tribute band.
You don't say.
Yeah. And the lead singer is Peter, called Peter.
Amazing.
And he was on Britain's Got Talent as well, actually, like many years ago. He got to the live semi-final. But the guitarist in that band, he is also a piano player to a good level.
Yeah.
And we always, after gigs, we'll always talk about piano pieces, and he professes his love for a piece called Fantasy Impromptu by Chopin.
Okay.
It's actually one of that's been
I
the
thought
final.
it sounded familiar.
Actually played.
Yeah.
Teddy played at the final. And so I didn't really know this piece that many years ago when he told me about it. So I went and listened to it, and it completely blew my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, I'm going to learn this. So it was around about the time that I started learning that I decided this is amazing. It's really difficult as well. Mm-hmm. So just by learning or playing pieces like that, it sends me on a sort of creative spiral in that kind of genre.
Yeah.
So before that, I would have been learning ragtime pieces, so I write ragtime music. Yeah. It's a little bit like, what was the last thing you heard on the radio? All of a sudden you start writing things like that.
Yeah, it gets stuck in your head.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Problem with a piece like Fantasy Impromptu, you have to play it so many times just to be able to play it.
Yeah.
That it's so stuck in your head that it won't leave for about 6 months. And so as a result of that, I didn't want to play it all the time, so I ended up started playing other things that sounded a bit like it, and then all of a sudden all these pieces came out. So that's romantic classical.
It made me think earlier. Actually, you were talking about listening to music and then playing it after listening to it, because I sing as well, and there's been a few songs that I've sung that I've listened to the original, and then I stopped listening to the original. I listened to it well enough to get to know it. But then I find that what I'm doing is I'm trying to exactly recreate the original, which I don't really want to do because I probably can't anyway. And particularly if it's something like Stevie Wonder, I'm never going to sing like Stevie Wonder. But then I find that gives me space to create my own interpretation. Yeah. And I guess it's a similar kind of thing that you're playing a lot of Chopin and then you find yourself writing stuff that's like Chopin, but you don't want to be trying to be Chopin.
That's
you still want to have your own colour to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is exactly. So it's, for me, sometimes you hear about people that write a hit song in 3 minutes. 3 minutes, wrote a hit song, 3 minutes, and it's the biggest song in the world for 10 years. Well, it's the opposite for me.
Right.
It might take me a few months to write something, just to get it to where it wants to go. And my process is I won't record it at any stage. I'll just keep playing it, and I'll play bits, and then I'll think, oh, that's a great bit, but then I want to play it for a week, and then I'll go back and try and remember the bit, and then I'll forget it, and then I'll write something better. So it's kind of constantly evolving thing. So I don't record them until they're finished. So it's just from memory, and sometimes I forget great sections and pieces, and I console myself by saying, look, it's in there somewhere, it'll come out eventually.
If it's important, it'll come out.
Yeah. So
if it's really good, I won't forget it.
I've got 4 pieces at the moment that I've never recorded, and they're completely in my head, and I should record them, but I'm thinking the reason that I haven't is, first of all, I'm not sure if they're actually finished. Secondly, I'm not sure if I can even play them, because I always try, I don't know why, I write things that I can't even play.
Yeah, I've done that.
Yeah, because you might come up with an idea and you go, I don't know if it's possible to play that, and then you can almost play it, and then eventually you can play it, but it might take you months. So that's the process. That's why it takes
Yeah.
me so long to write things, I think.
Yeah. I mean, been going through an interesting process the last few weeks because I've been arranging a song for the choir that I sing with. I'm literally about to start teaching it to them this evening.
Right. Wow. Okay.
And I've had to, it's been really interesting process because I'll come up with a new version of it and I'll think, oh, I quite like that. And then I'll record the teaching track. So I'll record myself singing all 4 parts so that people can listen to it, because most of the people in the choir don't read sheet music.
Mhm.
And then in the process of recording the teaching tracks, actually, this is quite hard to sing or hard to learn, or that it's unnecessarily complicated, and I need it to be easy for people to pick up, and I need it to make sense to them, and I need it to be in a reasonable range to cover a wide range of voices and for it not to be too much of a stretch for anybody. And so it keeps going back and forth and back and forth, and it's a really interesting process. But that thing about, in your context, being playable, but in my context being singable, and it has to absolutely be singable, not just by me, but by a whole bunch of other people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I remember my dad told me that his hero, Keith Emerson, that his dad said to him, Keith, why don't you write things that other people can play? He said, I don't know. I don't know. I write what I like.
Yeah.
And I understand that, because I just write what comes out. I don't follow any form. I don't say there needs to be this section, that section has to repeat, then we change key. I don't do anything like that. I start somewhere, I go in a straight line, and then wherever I end up.
Amazing.
And that's, and I only get there by making mistakes, or what I said on the programme, and this is true, when I'm out delivering mail, sometimes I'll write the piece in my head, or I'll write parts, and then I'll go home and I think, is that possible? And I'll go, oh yeah, that's possible, that's great, that was a good idea, that worked that time. And it's for that reason that when I'm out delivering mail, I'll put the wrong letter through the doors and things like that, because I'll be thinking about something else.
Yeah. There's a weird little coincidence about you mentioning Emerson, Lake and Palmer, because literally this morning I was in my mother-in-law's bathroom, and she's got a sign on the wall that says something about bubbles and trouble. And it instantly put in my head the song Big Bubbles, No Trouble by Emerson, Lake and Palmer, which I used to love when I was a teenager. And I got me thinking, that's actually, I don't think most of the stuff they made sounded like that even. I wonder where that came from. It made me want to go and listen to it. So I'm going to go and listen to it now after we finish.
Yeah, you should. It was probably written by Greg Lake rather than Keith Emerson.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's what really appealed to me. See, that's progressive music, progressive rock music. So I always really liked music that kind of just kept moving and kept changing.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm a little bit different now, though, because I think sometimes when you hit upon a great hook or great bit of music, you want to hear it again. You'll look forward to that hook coming back around in the song or in the piece. So I'll tend to repeat things now, but it used to be before.
Yeah.
I just wanted to just keep going and keep changing. I tell you what, it's highly energy sapping having a piece that's 5 minutes long that's always changing and trying to remember it as well.
Yeah, I can get that. Yeah.
So yeah, I've slightly changed my outlook on
it now.
Let's
go and play some music.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
The night I came home from the show, so this is after the second day's filming, I watched like Daria play and some and Graham, and I thought, oh my god, those folk are absolutely amazing. I said, I need to up my game, you know. So I came in and I was like, okay, I get it quite well, but I need something. Oh god, I was getting angry. I was thinking, I need to up my game. I need to do something that's like a bit more in your face right from the word go. So I just started messing around, and I don't know if this is even finished yet. So I'm just going to just mess around with it. Maybe you can have a bit of practice, or who knows where it goes. haven't played that for a while, so it's just.
Yeah, that's lovely.
So
Wow.
So that was like I came in and I was like, God, those guys are just so inspiring, especially the young kids. Some so kind of came in. I thought I need to up my game. So that's why it starts off always from an angry place or a place of frustration. So that's why I left hands like that. I've just played that for ages. And I was like, damn. Like that, you know. I'm Scottish, so I'm naturally sort of downbeat and frustrated and angry anyway, and we do our best. We have to hide it, you know. So all my pieces start like this. System now.
Thank you so much for speaking to me, Mikey. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for coming to see me, Claire. Yes, thanks
Brilliant.
again.
Thank
Goodbye.
you. Bye-bye. Thank you to Anthony Thomas, who provided the theme music, and stay tuned to hear more fascinating stories from street musicians.